Hey guys, Weston Nakamura from Real Vision in Tokyo. Let's talk about BITO, the ProShares Bitcoin Strategy Fund, which is the futures-backed Bitcoin ETF that launched earlier this week as the first Bitcoin ETF listed in the United States, or rather the futures-backed Bitcoin listed in the United States. Now, my background in finance actually started off trading futures and options at Goldman. Although obviously not crypto listed derivatives. Nonetheless, I do have a pretty good grasp and insight on the mechanics of things like rolling futures at expiry and all of that. So I'll be going over like all of that and more, and about the difference, the implications of having a futures backed Bitcoin ETF versus like a physical digital Bitcoin backed Bitcoin ETF. That's a mouthful. But I'll be talking about that in a separate video from this one. For now, I just want to share some quick personal takes, initial sort of, takes on this debut launch of this Bitcoin ETF and the many others that are slated to follow. Because this has been arguably the most significant direct and defined development to the space. And by the space, I'm strictly talking about market, price, action, and behavior. Markets. Not, the fundamental cryptography. Not some monetary story. Not some ideology. None of that. Like, I will openly declare I have zero value to add to any of those, and frankly, I don't care. It's not my core competency. I'm a financial markets guy. I understand market, price, action, and drivers, or at least I attempt to. As far as ETFs go, this is indeed one of significance, setting the record for having reached $1 billion in AUM in just 2 days. That was a record. Previous record for the fastest ETF to reach $1 billion in AUM, anyone know what that is? GLD. That took 3 days, as opposed to this one that took 2 days. And I know that made the Bitcoin people a little bit happier to hear, and that also made the gold people a lot angrier that the Bitcoin people are a little bit happier. I'm sure. I pull no punches. So, you know what becoming a record-breaking ETF launch means in the realm of market price action? It means that in just 2 days, or really actually just 1 day, as it relates to, again, short-term market price action behavior, but BTC Spot has become a legacy financial asset, just like the rest of them. And whether or not you think that's good or bad, and I'm guessing most of you think that's either bad or doesn't matter. It's a pretty big deal, and I'm finding it very strange that nobody finds it to be of the significance that it commands. The entire Bitcoin community counted down halvings like 4 New Year's Eves in one. And why did we do that? Well, some of them were for actual, fundamental change in supply miners or a developer standpoint even. But really, the overwhelming majority of us celebrated, a catalyst for a new regime of higher prices. In other words, market impacting dynamics that have changed. And yes, halvings have impacted pricing dynamics, but they did so extremely subtly. There was no sudden overnight flip, defining moment that was reflected in markets. Well, guess what? Bitcoin had an overnight flip, thanks to BITO. And I'm actually not talking about the day one launch of BITO on Tuesday. If anything, that was underwhelming, which is what I had expected. I'm not talking about day one, I'm talking about day 2. Anyone know why BTC Spot surged at 9:30 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday? And no, you won't find it on Glassnode. It's obviously because of BITO, but not BITO shares directly, because again, those had already debuted the day prior. Volume and activity was much larger on the second day. So what was it? It was the listing of BITO options. and the subsequent sort of like meme stock rush into call buying. A lot of this like demand for BITO isn't so much like investors piling into shares. Like, yes, some of it is. By and large, it's the systematic trading community, and two specific camps, of which are one, the market makers, and their activity in delta hedging for being sold, out of money calls on BITO, and then the second being the ARBs, the systematic hedge funds and trading houses. So this is why AUM and shares created and outstanding and trading volume in BITO, as well as open interest in CME futures, spiked on day 2. It's the options on BITO that came into the picture. That's what made the difference. And that's why at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, at US Cash Equity Open, you saw a huge amount of buying in call options on BITO, which then translated into buying of shares in BITO from the delta hedging dealer community, which then translated into CME futures activity, which then translates into underlying Bitcoin doing the same. So this is what I mean by Bitcoin has now become just another legacy asset for this particular moment. And as with nearly every underlying asset with like a derivatives ecosystem around it, it's the derivatives world that moves spot. It's not the other way around, okay? Not all the time and not every case, and yeah. But Bitcoin is the underlying instrument, right? And for the most part, it's really not that like heavily traded. Like there's people that are, or whales that are these hodlers, right? And so therefore you don't have that much price elasticity in spot Bitcoin itself. Fixed supply, not a lot of float, so on and so forth. But that's the underlying instrument. CME futures on Bitcoin, that's the first layer derivative on top of Bitcoin. BITO, which holds futures, that's the second layer derivative. And then options on BITO are the third layer derivatives. Those are huge forces. Those are leveraged instruments. I mean, they have a cap, but you can just call them unlimited open interest that can be created, unlike Bitcoin, obviously. And they're massive notional. They're aggressive players with incredible, trading infrastructure built around them. You have high frequency trading firms from Chicago, like, Jump Trading or Jane Street, who've just entered the space. Bitcoin has become institutionalized, and you can see it definitively in the price action at 9:30 a.m. Eastern and at 4 p.m. cash close in the U.S. Don't shoot the messenger. And again, no, I'm not saying it's going to be like that forever, but it is what it is. I don't care about ideological pushback or like, just look at the chart. I didn't draw this by hand. This is actual financial history. This is what happened. This is just a fact. And then what this also means is that, especially regarding people on the Real Vision Exchange for who I've generated, an unquantifiable amount of collective annoyance by repeating and re-repeating this notion of Bitcoin is not an American or USD denominated asset. It's a global asset class. You need to look at it in BTC JPY and other currencies. Yeah, well, although that certainly was true and 100% correct every time I said it, here's what I'll say to that now. Forget all that. For now. So again, it was the listing and the debut of the options on the ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF that really brought in what appears to be demand. You're seeing a reversal because you also had weeklies introduced as of today. And then what's in the pipeline? Well, we have several more of these futures ETFs coming. On Friday, we have the debut of the Valkyrie Bitcoin Strategy ETF, ticker BTF. It used to be originally the ticker BTFD, and for those who have been living under a rock, BTFD stands for buy the fucking dip, which is a cool way of saying buy low, sell high. Maybe not the sell high part, but buy low, which is a cool way of saying value investing, I suppose. But yeah, BTFD, buy the fucking dip. That's what they tried to register as with the SEC, but then given the provocative name and the fact that that name was causing like extra time to review and approve by regulators, And this is a race amongst issuers, because to grab AUM, cannot waste time on some review and approval process. They ended up dropping the ticker BTFD and instead went with BTF, or by the fucking. I'm not like a linguist expert, but I think they dropped the wrong letter. And BTD, by the way, I looked it up, like BTD by the dip, which would be far more appropriate than by the fucking, also makes grammatically more sense. BTD isn't taken either. Like, the closest ticker I found was BTDG, which is a company called B2 Digital, which has a $6 million market cap and trades in fractions of a penny. And by the name of it, B2 Digital, and if you look at the stock chart, it clearly looks like a dot-com bubble tech stock, right? And perhaps it once was. But nowadays, apparently, they're like a mixed martial arts training company or something who just opened a new gym in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So the stock rallied from like 0.49 cents to 0.53 cents on that news. Back to this Valkyrie BTF, buy the fucking ETF. That starts trading on Friday. Then a third one, which is the Van Eck Bitcoin Strategy ETF, XBTF. That's set to go live Monday, October 25. And then we're also waiting for Invesco. They're the ones behind QQQ. And also an ETF, a futures ETF from Galaxy Digital, Novogratz. But this Valkyrie, BTFD, BTF switch thing, like, that one day to get ahead of the Van Eck debut, that one day matters because all of these futures ETFs are more or less the same, right? If you can front run your competitors for AUM, I mean, that's the only game in town, is the speed of the rollout. There's no differentiation, right? Not even worth waiting for a BTFD ticker. But now that we've kind of opened up this new world of trading for Bitcoin price action implications and all that kind of thing, the more of these futures ETFs that come, the more that CME open interest is going to explode. The more that they have their own respective options trading and the activity around those, the more you're going to get very mechanical movements. You might even get ARBs between ETFs, between futures and ETFs. You also have a whole ecosystem of the basis trade in which your long spot short futures that are kind of mixed up into this, and now they're going to start seeing spreads compress. You're likely going to see volatility dampen over time as ARBs get more and more involved, crushing volatility, taking out sort of implied volatility premium, which is actually going to be good for adoption over the long term. But yeah, this is an overnight change of significance. And you didn't need to watch this video to know that. You could just see that Bitcoin suddenly is moving like a stock on the New York Stock Exchange. At 9:30 a.m. and at 4 p.m., there are clear price action differences and impacts. Therefore, you need to keep an eye on October 29th, which is expiry date for CME October Bitcoin futures and micro Bitcoin futures contracts. We will have to see how much of that rolls into November and all that, but that date is the expiry date. So all the rolling from October to November and all that is taking place now as we speak, and is going to really pick up pace in the next few days going forward. And that's going to create a whole bunch more of moving parts and all that. And that's what I'll be covering in the next video about rolling and futures and ETFs that hold futures and all that. All right, thanks.